Hey, sixth graders. Today we're going to be starting to work on multiplying with integers. So we've done addition, we've done subtraction, and now today we're going to work with multiplication. So I just wanted to do a quick little warm-up with you guys today. And there's a reason for that here that I'll get to in just a couple of minutes. So let's get rolling here with this warm-up. So 9 and 9 obviously is 18. -7 plus -7. Again, if we use our rules, they are the same signs, so we have to find the sum of those. -3, -3, another -3 would give us that -9. Give us 15. Now, most of you would probably not add these separately, right? You would multiply, which would give you 24. And lastly, if we add those together, we get -16. Now, the thing I want you to point out to this warm-up is these were all what we call repeated addition problems. And another way that you learned in elementary school for repeated addition is multiplication. Okay, so we're going to get into a little multiplication now today. So, in this first example, it says, recall that multiplication is repeated addition. 3 times 2 means to add 3 groups of 2. So we'd have 2 plus 2 plus 2 added 3 times, which would give us that answer of 6. All right, so again, repeated addition, same thing as multiplication. Now, very similar, except now it's not 3 groups of 2, it's 3 groups of -2. So we would be adding -2 together 3 times, which would now give us that -6 value. Now this table right here really gets you to, I think, to see it in a very good way. The next two actually. So it says describe the pattern of the products in the table and then complete it. So we go from 4 to 2 to 0. So that pattern, right, is subtracting 2 every time. So -1 times 2 would give us -2. If we follow that pattern, -4, -6. So what you are just learning about now here is if you take a negative right here and multiply it by a positive, it's going to come out with a negative solution. All right. Now the next one. Again, let's follow our pattern. So -3 times 3 gives us -9. -3 times 2 gives us -6. So our pattern on this one is we're actually adding 3 every time. So if we add 3 to that, it'd give us 0. Add 3, add 3. So what you're learning here is that a negative times another negative actually makes it a positive. So if you have a negative number times another negative number, it makes it a positive. So what I want to kind of think about is because sometimes it's not just going to be, one negative and one negative. What if you had 3 numbers or 4 numbers? So a rule of thumb that we use here is if there's an odd number of negatives, your answer is going to be a negative answer. If there's an even number of negatives, then our answer is going to come out to be a positive answer. So if there's one negative, then it's going to be a negative answer. If there's 2, it's going to be a positive answer. If it was 4 negatives multiplied together, well, that's an even number, so that would be a positive. So again, kind of an easy way to think about that. So this basically talks about, again, when you have 2, but we don't like to say if you have 2. What if you had 5 or 6? So this is, again, where we talk about even number of negatives equals positive answer, odd number of negatives equals a negative answer. Okay, so what I like to teach my students is to just do the multiplication first, and then we'll go back and we'll put in the positive or negative signs. So 7 times 2 is 14. 9 times 7 is 63. 6 times 8, 48. 8 times 10, 80. 6 times 5, 30. 5 times 12, 60. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to count up those negatives. So number 1, that one didn't have any negatives, so it's going to be a positive answer. Now number 2 had 1 negative, and 1 negative, 1 is an odd number, therefore that makes it a -63. Number 3, again, has one negative, so that would make it a negative 48. Number 4 has two negatives, which is an even number, so that's going to be a positive 80. Number 5 has one negative, so that's going to be a negative 30. And number 6 will be a positive 60 because there are two negatives. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Again, even number makes it a positive. It's kind of like two positives kind of buddy up with each other, okay, or two negatives, sorry, kind of buddy up with each other and make it a positive. All right, I'm going to do the first 4, and I want you to try the last 4 on your own. So again, we're just going to do the math. 25, 44, 9, 56. And I'm going to stop there for right now. Now let's go back and let's see if any of these have to be negatives. So the first one, nope, two positives. Number 2, two positives. Number 3 has two negatives, so therefore it's going to be a positive. And number 4 has two negatives, so there again it's going to be a positive 56. Now at this time I'd like you to pause your iPad. I want you to try the next 4 on your own, please. All right, now when you come back, you should have number 5 being a negative 24 because there was one negative. Number 6 also being negative 24 because there was one negative. Number 7 is going to be 0 because it's negative 10 times negative 6, which would be 60, but then it's 60 times 0. And then the last one, again, you count up the negatives, and there's going to be 3 of them, which is an odd number. So 7 times 5 times 4 would give us 140. And then you count the negatives, and there's 3 of them. So therefore, it's a negative 140. All right, now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm going to choose to write some of these out here because now we're dealing with exponents. Okay, so this first one is negative 2 to the second power. So what that means is you have 2 of those negative 2 groups. So that means negative 2 times negative 2. So now the fact that I write it out, I think makes it a little bit easier on this one. So negative 2 times negative 2 would give me a positive 4. Now this one, what it does is it's saying you have negative of the 5 squared. So this one you're actually just going to do 5 times 5, which is 25. But then you have to remember that you have that negative out in front. So therefore, that one comes out to be a negative 25 because it was not 2 groups of negative 5. It was 2 groups of 5. Now, the last one here, again, I think it helps to write this out. But now see how the negative 4 is in parentheses. So it's a negative 4 being multiplied 3 times. So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. And then you have 1, 2, 3 negatives, so therefore that comes out to be a negative 64. All right, last example of today here. It says the bar graph shows the number of taxis a company has in service. The number of taxis decreases by the same amount each year for 4 years. Find the total change in the number of taxis. So we are going to take this 50 fewer taxis, which would be represented by a negative number, right, because it's going down. And we're going to multiply that by positive 4 for that 4 years. So the total change would be negative 200. Negative 200 taxis, I guess we should say, right? It's a word problem. All right, so that's our total change over those 4 years of running taxis. All right, so that concludes our lesson on multiplication. And just to remember, if you have an even number of negatives, it's going to turn it to a positive. And if you have an odd number of negatives, it's going to turn it to a negative.